Ladies and gentlemen, good morning, good afternoon to everybody, and welcome to our webinar. My name is Guillaume. I am Automotive and Mobility Senior Director at Ipsos, and I will be hosting that session today. So today we will reveal very interesting results from the 2025 edition of the Arval Mobility Observatory. Believe it or not, but it's already the 23rd edition of that barometer. So today, to take you through all those insights, I have the pleasure to welcome Oana Duma, who leads the Arval Mobility Observatory. Hello.
Hi, good afternoon, good morning.
As well as Zingha Lucien, who is Director of the Strategic Advisory Services at Element Fleet Management.
Yes.
Welcome, Zingha.
Thank you very much.
So before we deep dive into the insight of that Arval Mobility 2025 edition, I'd like to bring some element of context. I would like to remind you some of the trends that we observed on the automotive and mobility sector nowadays. I feel three trends particularly resonate with the ecosystem of the fleet managers. The first one is that the fact that the Chinese brands are going global. So with their huge production capacity, with the affordable production cost, and the necessity to export beyond their domestic markets, the Chinese brands are successfully gaining ground everywhere, in Asia, in LATAM, in Europe as well. The Chinese brand not only gain visibility, not only gain the trust of the people, they also gain market share. The advanced electrification technology that they have, the attractive design, the fact that their cars are very well equipped and affordable, allows the Chinese vehicle to gain market share and to disrupt the market in many places. The second important trend I would like to talk about is the development of, I would say, connected by design vehicle. The SDV, that you are very familiar with, the software design vehicle technology, enables significant progresses on the car connectivity. Just to name a few, and you will be familiar as well, the over-the-air updates, the advanced driving assistance systems that are quite often now powered by AI, but also the enhanced vehicle and driver safety, the optimized fleet management possibilities, as well as the enhanced experience for the drivers, are all incremental benefits brought by these new technologies. And the third, not least, of course, trend that I would like to mention today is the macroeconomic instability trend. So over the past 5 years, the increased cost of vehicle production, the increased cost of car usage, with the increase of the cost of energy, for instance, and the pressure on households and on corporation disposable income, made even more important than before the concept of the total cost of ownership, the TCO. So let's see how those global trends will resonate or not with the learnings from the 2025 Arval Mobility Observatory. So before we start, I would like probably to ask you, Oana, can you remind us a little bit what is the Arval Mobility Observatory?
So the Arval Mobility Observatory is an analysis and research platform that focuses on corporate mobility trends, insights, and forecasts. And we do have more than 23 years of experience. So I would say, in a nutshell, we are a very trusted source of corporate mobility intelligence.
Thank you, Anna.
Yeah.
And Zingha, can you tell us a little bit more about the Element Arval Global Alliance? That I think there is something special this year.
There absolutely is, yes, and thank you. So the Element Arval Global Alliance is essentially the leading strategic partnership in fleet management today. And the great thing about it, we started in 1995, and this year we celebrate 30 years of partnership, which is, a tremendous achievement for us, one we're very proud of. And how this has translated, throughout the course of those 30 years is currently we are at 4.5 million vehicles in management, 55 countries across various regions, and 8 trusted partners with a unified approach to strategic fleet management. So very proud of this achievement.
So 30 years of partnership.
30 years.
23rd edition of the Arval Mobility Observatory. That's very impressive.
Yeah.
So Oana, although most of the people attending the session today might be familiar with the Arval Mobility Observatory, would you mind just reminding us the scope as well as the value this barometer provides to the market?
Well, I'm going to say, Guillaume, that probably the most interesting part about the Fleet and Mobility Barometer, which is the Arval Mobility Observatory flagship publication, is the fact that it is a global report that has also local declinations. So you have one global report and then you have reports in all the other countries. This year we cover 28 countries, North America, Europe, and LATAM, with more than 8,000 interviews with fleet and mobility decision makers. And starting 2023, the barometer covers this bigger region because we are doing it together with the Element Arval Global Alliance.
Yes, and the value that it provides is that it gives exclusive insights into fleet and mobility trends. It takes into consideration market, other market considerations as well. But it also gives a lot of insight into challenges and opportunities within the market across various regions. And the way that it helps a lot of fleet professionals is that it allows them to make data-driven decisions, so ensuring that they understand what's happening as they're making the decisions that would impact their fleet, certainly. It allows them to benchmark their performance against other fleets as well. And then finally, it ensures that they could adapt their strategies according to what's happening in an evolving market. Right. Yeah, so
okay,
a lot of value there.
So a lot of insights potentially.
Yeah.
And I would like to start by digging into the 2025 edition. My first question to you would be, what really stand out from your point of view? What are the elements that surprised you? And you did mention about the challenges and opportunities that we can identify through this barometer. Would you like to tell us a little bit more about those elements?
So, say probably the biggest surprise this year is there is a lot of diversification in the challenges mentioned by the fleet and mobility stakeholders. This diversification stems from the fact that the decisions are not only business-oriented anymore, and we see that they converge towards what our consultants call the 3 Ps: people, planet, profit. And why I'm saying this, it's the top challenges worldwide today are implementing alternative energy technologies, inducing more responsible driving, mitigating the increased cost of TCO, and adapting to restrictive public policies on ICE. This shows that the areas of change for the future, the catalysts for change, are going to come in 3 areas in the coming years: environmental sustainability, cost efficiency, and employee satisfaction.
All right. And have you noticed some regional differences, or are those trends more global?
Yeah, there are definitely regional differences, but I think for the most part, the focus on alternative fuels is, it edged out most of the other challenges. I'd agree with Oana that there's a lot of diversity across the various countries. What I was very surprised about was that, alternative fuels edged out TCO, for example. As I interface with customers, TCO is usually what comes up, as the greatest challenge, especially with a lot of what we're seeing within the market, where we're experiencing inflationary factors. There is a lot of variability with fuel, for example, geopolitical pressures. So TCO is usually the focus. However, what I think is happening here is that it's either they've accepted that TCO is something that will likely increase for all of the factors that we mentioned, or they're taking it into consideration as they're looking at some of those other options, that we mentioned, as they're making mobility decisions or alternative fuel decisions as well.
Okay, so I would like to elaborate a little bit more on alternative to fuel technology. And I noticed that there is a kind of, the trend of electrification seems to mark a pause in this year edition. I wonder whether this is, first of all, something that you see across the board, and also how you would interpret this element that might say, okay, is there a slowdown, is there stability, how does it really is?
So I would say that there is not a slowdown in electrification at this moment in time. I would say that these figures reflect a very challenging 2024 year, a lot of instability from fiscal, legislative point of view, a lot of cost increases. So the electrification momentum is still there. It hasn't disappeared. But then, of course, you do have the challenge of comparing fleet types. It's one thing if you refer to passenger cars and another thing if you refer to commercial fleets or if you compare on different regions or countries. So in terms of cars, what we do see today is that 69% of companies declare they have an alternative energy in their fleets or they plan to have one in the next 3 years. That is battery electric vehicles or plug-in hybrids or hybrids. And that's a great figure, but this figure is very different across the regions. Europe is at 75%, and on the other side of the spectrum, we have LATAM, which is at 42%. North America is somewhere in between at 67%. When it comes to commercial vehicles, the figures are quite different. It's 24% of people declaring that they have or plan to have this alternative energy technologies. Here it's mostly electric vans and a very limited amount of hydrogen implementation. And actually here the figures, I would say, across the regions are much more closer one to another.
Okay, so why do you think is the root cause for that gap, I would say, between the electrification of passenger car fleet compared to the commercial one?
I think this might be very obvious response, but I think it's the purpose of the vehicles. The cars fleets in general are benefit cars or vans are commercial fleets. So if you have a commercial fleet, you need to be able to operate mostly 24 hours out of 24 hours. You need to do it in a very efficient way. It needs to be also cost optimized. I think these figures show that the fleet managers still believe in the electrification of their commercial fleets. It's just that they are wondering, how do I find a way to match my operational needs with finding the best LCVs today? So it's going to happen. The more we are seeing more and more models coming into the market, so I think this is going to help. Bigger range is going to help. Increased weight of the vehicles, it's going to, in legislation, it's going to help. So there are factors that are helping this. On the other hand, vans and cars have the same constraint in adapting more electric cars, and that is charging points. 65% of people mentioned their biggest problem are charging points.
All right, so it's getting very much across the board. And on that specific point of charging points, have you noticed or have you heard about some winning strategy for some corporations?
So that's actually a very interesting question, because this year it's the first year where we tried to investigate, hey, this is your biggest problem. Do you actually have also a strategy to overcome this? And what we've seen is 85% of the companies do have or plan to have a charging strategy, being that it's at home, at the office, or public charging. And these figures are very similar across all regions. This clearly shows that there is no slowdown in electrification. The figures are going to continue to increase. It's just a matter of solving these challenges. And I would say that probably the most surprising figure for me was that for the companies that are doing home installation, are proposing home installation as a charging strategy, 50% of them actually are doing this by supporting their drivers to have their charging point at home. And that support, it's almost 100% of financial support. So it's not, I'm supporting you on the paper, it's I'm paying, so I'm making sure my drivers drive an EV.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Another point that you mentioned earlier, I don't remember whether it was you or you, Zingha, is the car connectivity.
Yes.
We know we live in a world, data is key, or I would say data is king sometimes. So I read in the report that about 40% of the companies claim their vehicle are connected or can be connected, technically point of view, but that only a few of those companies do actually use the data.
Yeah.
So why do you think there is such a gap?
Yeah, and it may appear as a surprising gap, But really, it's not very surprising for one reason. So, as you mentioned, 40% use telematics or they have connected vehicles, but only 15% show that they actually use the data. And the reason for that is that the data is very complex, or there could be an overload of the data. So being able to reduce that to actionable insights becomes a little bit difficult, partly because it's sometimes difficult to integrate all of that data into fleet management systems and other organizational systems as well. So, so there's a lot of changes to be had there. Also, I'll mention that regulatory pressures, GDPR, for example, doesn't help us, data privacy risks don't help if they don't want to show the information, even if they do have it. So that's part of it. But there's been a lot of emerging technologies that's helping. AI certainly helps for us to be able to develop some insights, coming from, telematics and connected vehicles. So sustainability helps. And there are, evolving technologies around connectivity as well that will evolve in the right direction, I believe.
All right.
Yeah.
Interestingly, in what you said, I noticed one point, which is about the benefit and how it turns into something that is tangible for the fleet managers. We know that in America, there are about 41 million of American drivers who are using telematic equipment because they subscribe to the usage-based insurance, UBI.
Yeah.
So in that specific case, we know there is a direct benefit for the driver, which is the more, I would say, their driving behavior may have an influence on the insurance that they pay. So when it comes to the fleet manager and the connectivity that are brought in by the telematics, how would you define those benefits for the fleet managers?
Yeah, and there are so many measurable benefits when it comes to, connected vehicles. Of course, I think the very first benefit is that there's data, right? There are insights that can come from it that can help them make the right decisions for their fleet around costs, around sustainable, just general operations, for example. But I'll give you some of the very few that it's vast. Firstly, cost efficiency, even understanding, how we're spending our money. Is it on fuel, maintenance, all of these, just giving them a complete view of their spend is one way to start. So then they could then change the strategies to ensure that they're moving in the right direction, optimally managing their fleet spend. There's also productivity gains as well, understanding how those vehicles are being used, so that they could also ensure, do they have the right vehicles? Are they being used appropriately? Risk and safety, risk mitigation is definitely one of the focuses of telematics. That's important. Sustainability gains, what's their impact on the environment? It's something that telematics could very easily help them understand. But I think overall also it's good to know, is it a strategic asset? Is it bringing revenue? How are they servicing their customers? All of these things can be realized by using telematics as well. Going back to your question on insurance, because as I mentioned, telematics takes in a lot of information. So it collects that information through the device, but then it's transmitted to insurance organizations to be analyzed, right? And so they could take that information and understand a little bit better of what the risk profile is of the vehicle, of the driver. And of course, since it's real life information as opposed to general assumptions, they can then use that to have an impact on premiums as well. So there's definitely a benefit there as well. So it's a lot of really good things that can come out of connected vehicles as long as the data is actually being used. So we have to increase those numbers past 15%.
Yeah, absolutely. So in one of the benefits that you mentioned, there is a financial component in that.
Yeah.
And that's a perfect transition to jump on the third topic I would like to address with you, which is about the total cost of ownership. We know they've been massively massive changes, not only in terms of the cost of the car, we mentioned it, the cost of the energy to power the car, but also massive changes in terms of regulation and incentive schemes to push for an electrification of the fleet, for instance. So there's more complexity, there are more factors, coming in this concept of the TCO. Yeah. So how would you say that the fleet managers are embracing the complexity of the TCO today, and what have you observed in the barometer this year?
Yeah, I think it's important to note that TCO varies across the globe. So it takes into consideration that, as I mentioned, fuel, it takes into consideration labor costs as well, adoption of certain technologies, infrastructure, how the vehicles are being utilized certainly plays a very big part in what the actual cost of managing a fleet can be. So if you think about those factors mentioned, in certain developed regions like Europe and North America, you'll find that fuel spend, they face higher fuel spend and labor costs, whereas they're probably a little bit better when it comes to infrastructure and adoption of technologies, whereas in emerging markets, it's somewhat flipped, right? And so even the cultures of those individual regions will determine what TCO looks like as well, based on the types of vehicles they use, the industries they service, just the general utilization of those assets. And what also has happened, and we've spoken about that throughout this conversation thus far, is that a lot of these emerging technologies is going to give us a better view into the depth of what TCO is, right? So understanding the total cost of ownership in a more comprehensive way than we ever have, and not just looking at the traditional views or the traditional aspects of TCO, like depreciation and fuel and maintenance and accidents, but understanding maybe even the opportunity cost of certain things. What's the cost of downtime? What is the cost of not servicing a particular customer? All of these things are important when we're talking about a TCO, just ensuring that it is a strategic asset supporting a particular business and really bringing value to an organization. So.
All right. Yeah. All right. Another topic that I would like probably to touch upon is the evolution of the mobility packages that the company can offer to their employee. I wonder whether you have noticed some evolution on that fold. Is there more diverse type of mobility packages that are offered? And is there an impact on the fleet size, for instance?
So I think this is a very common, I would say, misconception that fleet and mobility are going to eat one another at some point. 91% of the fleet managers that we've discussed say that they are very trustful in their fleets to remain stable or even increase in the next 3 years. So fleets are going to stay there. Mobility is also developing, but I think it's important to keep in mind that corporate mobility is something that addresses to all the employees in a company. Not all the employees in your company have also a fleet or a car allocated to them. Yeah. So this is actually why they don't go against each other, and I think this is why we have seen this diversification when it comes to the development of mobility policies and solutions. It becomes a much more transversal environment where you have HR and CSR and procurement and finance, everything working together. And this is very evident for the figures that we have in the barometer. More than 45% of people mention that they are implementing mobility policies and solutions because of HR needs. And in Europe, more than 50% of them mention that they are doing this because in order to align with their CSR policies. Okay. So, and yeah, the numbers of implementation and the trends are there. So I would say, yes, they are developing and they are going to continue to develop.
Okay, in a complementary way.
Exactly.
Essentially. Okay.
Yeah, and I will add to that. Mobility is evolving at a different pace, across the globe as well. And so there's so many factors that can affect it, whether it's regulation, environment, infrastructure, Customers are getting a little bit more impatient. So we're seeing a lot of these things definitely impacting moving towards, different modes of mobility, certainly. But, definitely we're moving in the right direction. But I'd say we're in North America definitely following Europe in that regard. So.
All right. So thank you very much for the clarity of your explanation. I think we are about to reach the end of our timing, or the end of the webinar. But before closing, would like to ask a more probably more personal point of view. What is your perspective for the future? So the 2025 edition of the Arval Mobility Barometer gives us a lot of insights about what the situation is today, but your personal perspective on the future of the trend for the fleet managers. So maybe Oana, if you want to start.
Well, thanks a lot, Guillaume. That's a very good question. I guess if we'd all have a crystal ball to understand a bit the trends of the future, it would be much easier for us and for the fleet managers and people in this industry that are attending this webinar. But from where I'm staying personally, I think we're still going to have this very complex geopolitical, economical context. I think that's not going to disappear over the night, unfortunately. However, in this whole thing, it's going to be much more focused on employees' needs, but also on sustainability. And I think sustainability will remain at the core of the decision-making in the fleet and mobility industry. So 3 main ideas for the future: electrification, momentum, it's still going to grow and it's still going to develop for the next years. We know there are a lot of battery advancements, a lot of technological advancements. The second one, it's something that I think we've all touched point on this one. It's the connected cars and the autonomous driving and this whole technological development. For sure, that's going to have an impact in the cost efficiency, in driver safety. So that's going to change a bit the way in which we see things today. And the third thing, it's corporate mobility. We just talked about it earlier. I think we're stepping back a bit from the concept of mobility as a service as it was a few years. But I think we are going more into the concept of how do I find the good mobility solution for each of the employee needs, being that it's a car, a bike, a mobility budget, and being able to respond to this. So probably the future, in 3 words, is going to be focused on sustainability, and we need to be open to innovation and remain very flexible in these areas.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with a lot of what Oana is saying. And I've been in this industry for 18 years now, and I've seen it evolve in so many ways, and technology has certainly shaped it in a lot of ways. But one of the things I can, if I were to have a crystal ball, as Oana mentioned, one of the things that I will say is that with all of the technologies, emerging technologies that are shaping the industry, we're guaranteed to have new ways of measuring the success of a fleet. So guaranteed to have different measures that will help us understand how we're performing, very different from just the traditional ways, because we're going to depend on technologies around connectivity, around sustainability, where with being more connected, cybersecurity becomes an issue. So just ways that we're ensuring the success of the fleet that we otherwise would not have to think of. And then what that leads to as technologies are shaping this industry are a different kind of fleet manager, a different kind of fleet professional, which is a little bit more attuned to what's happening within technology itself. So they'll have to learn different tools, different responsibilities, different methodologies that could help them be a little bit more efficient and competent within their space. So.
All right, thank you so much. Thank you, Zingha. Thank you very much for all the clarity of your explanation. Thank you, Oana, also for sharing all those insights with us today. And I would like also to say a big thank you to all of you who attend this webinar. If you need more information, and I'm pretty sure you're eager to know more about the outcome and the results for that 2025 Arval Mobility Observatory, you can see on the screen where to go, and I think this is on element.arval.com/barometer 2025. And once again, thank you very much for attending. Once again, thank you, Zingha, and thank you, Oana.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Looking forward to hear from you soon.
Indeed.